all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Good day. I'm Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today here on Veterans Radio, and thanks for joining us. We've got some interesting stories for you. We always want to remind you you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or at the web, veteransradio.org, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.org. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. And finally, PuroClean. PuroClean is the paramedics of property damage. It provides water damage remediation, flood water removal, fire and smoke damage remediation, mold removal, biohazard cleanup. It also has a focus on veteran franchisees. You can learn more about them by going to puroclean.com. We just want to remind you that Veterans Radio podcasts are available on all your favorite streaming platforms, including rss.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Rees Across America Radio. So wherever you are, you can find us. We were recently identified as in the 15th spot, if you will, of the top 100 veteran-centric podcasts by FeedSpot. So we're really pretty proud of being in the top 15. So listen in wherever you're at to veteransradio.org and its podcasts. We've got a couple of special programs for you today that I think you're going to find interesting. You probably won't find them anywhere else, which is what we try to do, is bring you this information. The first is going to be an interview talking about the atrocities that the Japanese committed in World War II, and it's from the Pacific Atrocities Foundation. They're focusing on this because so much of what we focus on is in World War II is the European action, and then maybe the U.S. winning battles in the Pacific, but not the battles that occurred between Japan and China. So that's what's going to be focused there. And as we come into the month, it's also a good time to remember our MIA POWs, and we're going to talk to a gentleman who's been kind of focused on that since Vietnam, making sure we never forget. Both good interviews. Listen in.
We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today historian, author, fellow, Quin Cho, who's going to talk to us about the Pacific Atrocities Education Foundation out in California, although I think he's actually on the East Coast at this point. But Quin, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Well, let me set this up a little bit. You are, as I mentioned, a historian and author, specializing in the history of global conflict and geopolitics in the Asia-Pacific region. You are a 2023 graduate summa cum laude from the University of Southern California. We always like to have these really smart guys on because you can help the rest of us regular folk just understand what's going on. You had a double major in history and international relations. You are a fellow at the Pacific Atrocities Education Foundation. And that's an organization, as I understand it, that started in 2014 by Jenny Chen to have a little more focus, a little more research, a little more academics on what went on in the Asia Pacific region during World War II. We tend to focus a little more, I think, on European theater, but a whole lot of activities. I know my father was over in the Pacific, so a lot of activities in the Pacific. But tell us how you got involved with the Pacific Atrocities Education.
Yeah, so I actually got involved with Pacific Atrocities Education in the summer of 2020 during the pandemic. I've had an interest in the Second World War and in military history for quite a long time since I was a rather small child, and uh, by the time that I was done with my freshman year of college, I found this internship opportunity on the Pacific Atrocities Education website, and I applied and I became an intern, and I wrote a book actually on the China, Burma, India campaign of World War II. Um, it's on Amazon. You can buy it if you are so desire. It's called Competing Empires in Burma. Um, the China, Burma, India theater of World War II, and uh, yeah, I did that, and I've actually today I just completed a over 400-page book about the Kwantung Army, which was a Japanese army in Manchuria. After my fellowship ended in 2020, I uh, basically started a new project on the Kwantung Army, and um, I've been working on it in the summers and ever since I became a fellow at PAE after graduation. And today I finished. I finished the
Well,
final draft of volume one.
congratulations. Congratulations. That's got to feel great to finally say, okay, that's done. Now, are you still in the editing for publications phase, or is that all done as well?
I just finished the editing process. It took a lot out of me, and I've pulled some all-nighters here, but I've burnt the candle on both ends and gone to the mat, but I think the result will end up being worth it in the end.
Well, one of the things I think Pacific Atrocities Education is trying to do is put a little more scholarly research into, hey, what really went on in World War II uh, from a Japanese Army perspective. Can you talk about a little bit about the scholarship and the research that Pacific Atrocities has been focused on for going on now something like 10 years, 10, 11 years?
Yes, so generally speaking, as you pointed out, in the kind of English speaking world and even the Western world more generally, there is maybe less knowledge about the Asia Pacific theater of World War II. Especially anything that happens on the Asian continent, the Asian mainland, right? I think is very uh, forgotten and overlooked, if it was even forgotten at all. In most cases, I'd say in America, it's just kind of not well known that for, depending on how you count, either 4 or even 10 years before the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the Chinese were engaged in a pretty high intensity conflict with the Japanese with the Imperial Japanese Army. I think at the peak of the Imperial Japanese Army's uh, deployment to China, I think there's somewhere around 1.5 or 1.6 million troops that were deployed, and they were these obviously being tied down to this extent in a country so big and vast as China is a bit of a strategic blunder from the perspective of Japan. But more to the question, we basically write about and try to inform English-speaking audiences about a variety of different topics, mainly and especially the various atrocities the Imperial Japanese Army committed on the Asian mainland in their campaigns of imperial aggression, but also the campaigns themselves, the military history and the operational history, if you will. We try to tell that. I actually kind of see myself as being a bit of an ops guy. So that's we try to strike a fine balance, but there is definitely an emphasis on uh, the atrocities that the Imperial Japanese Army committed during the war.
And a lot of this, as you mentioned, is, I don't think we in the United States really have maybe been exposed to it, in part because Hollywood hasn't done its bit to make the right movies, right? There are hundreds of books and videos that Pacific Atrocities has put up on its website, which is pacificatrocities.org. From fall of Saigon, fall of Singapore, I mean, the China-Burma-India War, Philippines resistance, and then Unit 731, which I want you to talk a little bit about because I don't know anything about this. And as you say, you've written, researched and written on the China-Burma-India Theater and the Kwantung Army. Kind of give us at a high level those things which we just haven't yet focused on in that area.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in both cases. With regards to the China-Burma-India Theater, it is very noteworthy for being a very multinational theater. It is all you have Chinese, you have Indians, you have West Africans, you have uh, various different types of the Burmans and people who would not call themselves Burman from what's now called Myanmar. You obviously have the Japanese, you have Americans, you have British, and etc. and on down the line. It's a very diverse pool of people that are fighting over Burma, which was primarily important in a strategic sense because it is a route by which the Allies, Britain and America, could send China weapons, oil, and supplies, at least up through the spring of 1942 when Burma fell after a series of kind of rapid Japanese outflanking maneuvers of the defenders and the, shall we say, less than optimal preparation and deployment of those said defenders to kind of give you an idea of the unpreparedness of the British defenders in Burma during the first Burma campaign. You had one division defending 400 miles of frontage. That, for reference, division should probably defend somewhere around about 10 kilometers of frontage in World War II. 400 miles is in almost, even if the terrain is totally impassable, would be quite a bit still to ask of one division. That's a rabbit hole. With regards
Hey, Quinn, let me ask you this. Were the mistakes which Britain and the U.S. made in some of these actions in Asia in part because they just didn't know what the heck they were getting into? They were unfamiliar with that part of the world, or did they just truly underestimate the capabilities of the Imperial Army and maybe the Chinese forces as well? After you've done all this research, what are your thoughts on some of those strategic or operational mistakes that were made?
So in the case of the British, especially early in the war, and even to an extent the Americans as well, there was an underestimation of the Japanese, the Imperial Japanese Army, that was rather severe. In part, it was kind of a byproduct of the prejudices of the day, of the kind of the racism, to put it bluntly. You had some, British soldiers and airmen who didn't think the Japanese could be good pilots or design good aircraft. And then they found out that the Japanese had established air superiority over Malaya and Singapore in the matter of a few days. But really, it's a combination of poorly appraising the enemy and also not being prepared to fight against an enemy that is weaponizing surprise, rapid light infantry outflanking maneuvers, and being ready for the jungle warfare, essentially. There was an element of unpreparedness of defending the jungle. There's too much just focusing on cleared areas and key roads and kind of maintaining defenses in these places, but not in the, shall we say, less traversable, though still passable terrain.
I know I'm
So
jumping
that
all around.
really,
I know I'm
yeah,
jumping all around, and there's way too much to cover here, and we'll probably have to do this again. But let me because I think Jenny would want to make sure we talk some, not only about some of those operational issues, but the atrocities themselves. I think that's what shook her in 2014 to say, wow, I didn't know the Imperial Japanese Army did that. It is shocking, and that's what she's trying to make sure doesn't get lost to history. Can you give us a little bit of insight into those or that area?
of course. So I just completed a book on the Kwantung Army, and one of the kind of most extreme aspects of the Kwantung Army was, as you pointed out, Unit 731. And Unit 731 was the bacteriological and biological warfare element within the Kwantung Army. And its role was to test and try and develop bacteriological and biological weapons. But the way they did this was they experimented on people. And they, for instance, would inject people with diseases such as anthrax and syphilis, and try and see what happened. They would freeze people. They would do experiments where they would try to find out the threshold for frostbite and to what extent you could survive extreme cold or pressure, or alternatively live vivisections. They would basically take people's vital organs out of their body while they were still alive, and try to see how long it would take for them to die and what would happen, or they might try to reattach one part of the body to another, and this was something that was, they made into an industry of sorts. They made it in. They did it at a scale and for a length of time that is quite shuddering to think about. Quite honestly, it's and the craziest part is that after the end of World War II, they got off the hook because General MacArthur wanted the results from the experiments, and he didn't opt to prosecute them at the Tokyo war crimes trials. The head of 731, Ishishiro, he exchanged the results of the experiments for essentially going free.
There is, I think, widely known in the United States, the certain amount of brutality in the Japanese POW camps. I think the death rate far exceeded the death rate in the German camps. As you research this and thought about some of these atrocities, is there an explanation or a rationale for why?
Well, in terms of Western Allied prisoners of war in German camps, I think the death rate was somewhere around like 3% or something. It was pretty small. In the Japanese prisoner of war camps, it was somewhere around 27%. If you were alternatively a Chinese prisoner, you were basically dead if you got taken prisoner. In most cases, there were some instances of guys that would be maybe impressed into roles as soldiers in a puppet army or puppet militia, or made to do some kind of slave labor. But by and large, the Imperial Japanese Army did not take Chinese prisoners, right? They killed a lot of them. That was kind of their modus operandi, and one of the reasons that the IJA treated prisoners so badly was because of the culture that was kind of fostered within the IJA from basic training on forward. So there was frequent corporal punishment from NCOs that was inflicted on the enlisted ranks during basic training and even after. This was quite common. Officers would also sometimes strike their subordinates. You would, and all the while, these men are being kind of inculcated with the idea that it's very shameful to surrender. It's very shameful to give up. It's not a fighting man does not do this. He doesn't give up the fight as long as he has fighting breath. This was in many ways a byproduct of the IJA's doctrinal emphasis on morale and spirit and elan over kind of factors such as firepower or numerical superiority or material capability. This was in people call it kind of understand it in terms of Bushido, or the way of the warrior. But even really the IJA actually, in a sense, picked and chose what it wanted to from the existing tradition or pre-existing tradition of Bushido, and they basically chose the parts that were more suitable to creating brainwashed warriors that would kill at the drop of a hat and on command.
Without any sense of humanity, right? If you're going to kill all the Chinese prisoners, and the death rate in the Japanese POW camps for Americans and Australians and British was so high, there's really no sense of humanity there, was there?
Well, there's no humanity. It's also worth noting that Japan went to war with a limited food supply. right? So you're basically, they went to war with only kind of 90% of the food requirements that they needed, which sounds okay until you realize that a at least probably 5 to 10% of the population is going to starve because of that, if not more. When you take into account infrastructure and kind of various inefficiencies and things of that nature. So, for instance, in Vietnam, towards the end of the war in 1944 and 5, you had over 1 million people starved to death, because the Japanese infantrymen were kind of left to wither on the vine. Their logistical situation had collapsed in part because of the American submarine campaign in the latter years of the war, and in part because the IJA's logistical system was very flawed and limited to begin with. But they, yeah, were basically just going around foraging for food and um, basically, yeah, stealing it from.
Yeah, they didn't need another mouth to feed, whether however you were a prisoner. Let me ask you this as we kind of run through some time here, and why is it important that the work of the Pacific Atrocities Education move forward? What is it, as an author, a historian, a researcher? Give us that sort of big picture view of why it's important not to forget this.
Well, it's important for several reasons. For one thing, you have it's within living memory, and there is also a historical memory of all the atrocities and misdeeds that the Imperial Japanese Army committed in Asia during the war. So in China, for example, in I think this month, you have films being released about Unit 731 and also about the rape of Nanking, which is probably the more Iris Chang wrote a very famous book entitled "The Rape of Nanking," I think back in 2003, and it did a very good job of chronicling how the Imperial Japanese Army basically slaughtered probably hundreds of thousands of Chinese in Nanking after the fall of the city. Um, so, these events and these historical occurrences are still within living memory uh, of many people in East Asia. And, I think that it's Japan has not really adequately apologized for any of the atrocities that it committed during the war. And I must say that the American government in the post-war era made a conscious decision to empower certain elements within Japan that were complicit, or in some cases more than complicit, in the war crimes that were committed during the war. So to give an example, there was a fellow named Kishi Nobusuke who oversaw the economy and industrialization of Manchuria, and he was using slave labor in the millions to basically build a military industrial complex in Manchuria. But after the war, he was basically, he became the prime minister of Japan in the late 50s with the help of the American CIA, and his grandson, a fellow by the name of Abe Shinzo, became the prime minister of Japan. So there is a pretty straight line that can be drawn between the various figures that emerge from the dust of World War II and that emerge from the result of World War II into the relatively contemporary period.
Yeah, that ripple carries forward right to today.
Hope you enjoyed that discussion with Quin Cho. We actually have a longer discussion with him on our podcast, which you can go find at any of your favorite download locations. Look for Veterans Radio. And Quin Cho talks about the Kwantung Army as well, which is pre-World War II. But I also learned about Unit 731 from him, and there's a lot of writing on this in the Pacific Atrocities.org website and books. These are Unit 731 did ghastly medical experiments on people. We know about what the Nazis did. We haven't paid much attention, I don't think, to what was done by the Imperial Japanese Army, so you may want to listen to that too. A few words from sponsors and supporters, and then we'll get on with talking about MIA POW issues.
Military veterans touch everyone's life. I'm guessing right now you're thinking of a veteran, a close friend, relative. Maybe it's you. Even the toughest of us sometimes need help, but don't know where to turn for support. You don't need special training to help a veteran in your life. Even small actions can make a world of difference. If you know a veteran in crisis, please call the Veterans Crisis Line, 800-273-8255. 800-273-8255. A message from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today Air Force veteran Raymond Mike Sands. It goes by Mike, so that's what I'm going to call him. Mike, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate everything you're doing and getting the word out about what we veterans are up to.
Well, that's one of the stories we want to tell. Most people probably don't know that the third Friday of every September is National Recognition Day, MIA POW National Recognition Day. And we want to highlight that a little bit. We're going to talk about that some. Mike served in the Air Force from about August of 1967 till sometime in 1971, and comes from, his father was a veteran, an Army veteran, World War II, but Mike has never walked away from his veteran status and is still very active in terms of trying to keep certain messages alive here in the state and here nationally. Mike, I think most people would be surprised to know that there's still 88,000 service members missing from the wars and conflicts in which the U.S. has been engaged. That's a big number.
For sure.
And one of your counterparts in this effort is a woman by the name of Marty Eddy, who's been involved in this since the early 1970s, has a family connection as to why she's so active in it. But almost every month, maybe almost every week, their DOD is announcing the identification of remains of those 88,000 missing service members. DNA technology, I suppose, is how this all gets done. But talk about a little bit about what drew you into working on this issue and keeping this issue alive.
Well, how much time do you have? No, it's quite fascinating. I don't know if I've been blessed or cursed, but my father served at the end of World War II in Germany, and my family descended from Eastern Europe. So my father, being German, sprechen Sie Deutsch, kleine Bissel, ended up in Germany at the end of the war, and he was a truck driver. And I'm going, truck driver, what's he doing with a combat infantry badge? Why is a guy that worked in the motor pool have at the end of the war? Well, I found out years later that he was part of the program, if you will, to clean up the mess after the Russians came in and slaughtered the Germans. So he had what they called shell shock at that time. And that's one of the reasons that he was so involved with the American Legion. So when I came along, he wanted to keep that flag flying. So he signed me up as a charter member of the Sons of the American Legion when I was 10. So I would go in the parades. I would, decorate my bicycle red, white, and blue and all this. And so in my teens, I became draft bait, of course. And because of my interest in shop class, I was able to pass the Air Force qualification test and join for 4 years as opposed to being drafted for 2. But that created a situation where my dad said, "Oh, now that you're a veteran, you need to get back involved." Well, when the Vietnam vets came home, we weren't very popular, of course. And a lot of the World War II people say you didn't fight in the real war, la, la, la. But my dad always supported me. And that's kind of what got my interest. But there's a song from the 60s called 10 Years After. A lot of us Vietnam guys, we had to, reestablish our jobs, our families, readjust to being home. And so there was a drought there for a long time. So even though I was in the American Legion, I didn't do much. I met a fellow during when David Bonnier was running for office. He's from Macomb County, and so am I. And he was all about veterans in Congress, about recognizing our service. And he had a rally in Detroit, and a friend of mine and I went there. We met a fellow named Jack Devine. Jack Devine was one of the founders of Vietnam Veterans of Michigan. And later they joined up with Bobby Muller, the Vietnam Veterans of America out of New York. And so we became Chapter 9. And because we're Detroiters, people, you guys are pretty tough. Well, literally, we bought a building in the heart of the Cass Corridor, which at the time was the murder capital of America, and bought a building from the University of Michigan Regents for $10,000. And this place was a hellhole. I mean, the homeless had dragged in all kinds of what and feces, blah, blah, blah. We took 13 dead cats out of there, but we turned that building into a veterans center to help the community, to help homeless veterans, to make a difference. And I think the record speaks for itself. But I'm proud to be member number 61 and be involved and be able to carry on the forward progress of Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 9.
Well, you were a board member for that chapter. You're a former commissioner with the Michigan Vietnam Memorial Monument that was built up in Capitol grounds and dedicated 20 years plus now in 2001. You've been active for a long time and sort of have a view of the importance of continuing to think about our POWs and MIAs.
For sure.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, again, interesting. A couple of things. Number one, that I served in the Air Force during the bombing of North Vietnam and Rolling Thunder. I serviced the F-105 Thunder Chief, which has stories. They call it the one-man guided missile. They call it the Thud. That aircraft was originally designed to carry a nuclear warhead. I don't know if you know that, but the F-105 Thunder Chief from the Cold War has a bomb bay, and the bomb bay was designed to carry a nuclear warhead. And the planes were stationed in Europe, and the pilots, it was the Strategic Air Command at the time, and if the pilots got called up, they had a specific target that they were given once they were called up, and they would not return from that target because the detonation of the nuclear bomb was greater than the speed of the aircraft. So you could say that we had kamikaze pilots. So that aircraft was never used for the purpose it was intended. But when the war started in Vietnam, they converted it to a fighter bomber and loaded it up with everything from anti-personnel bombs, napalm, 500-pound bombs, 750-pound bombs. And so these pilots, the lead sled, they sometimes call this, use this thing for a purpose that it wasn't initially designed for. Anyway, we lost a lot of those aircraft. We lost a whole lot of those aircraft. And I would, send them out. I'm a ground crew person. but I was responsible for all the flight controls, the landing gear, the steering, all that business.
And you told me earlier you were over in Thailand. These are the
I was in
planes that,
Thailand.
secretly are coming out of Thailand and supporting the
Right.
war mission. And,
Right.
and so guys from that base that were shot down,
For
became
sure.
POWs or MIAs. And so
Yes.
that's kind of where the driver came for you, I take it.
Oh yeah. Well, not only that, I mean, I'm having goosebumps while I'm speaking with you, but I don't know if you've heard of Digger Odell.
Oh, sure.
Digger Odell, he flew the same aircraft that I serviced, F-105 Thunder Chiefs. And he was there before I was, but when I later found out that Digger flew out of Korat, where I was, we kind of bonded. So I got to know Digger very, very well. And also he was the public affairs fellow for Southbridge Air Base here, which I'm also involved with. So
and just for our listeners who don't know the story as well as you do,
sure,
he was a POW.
Oh, for sure, for 5, yeah.
Something
5.5 years.
5 years, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, you have this personal connection with this issue, and it really goes kind of beyond just, geez, I feel bad for these families who don't know what happened to their loved ones.
Well, here's a story that I would like to share with you. So, the war, we pulled out in 73. The war was over in 75. But we had our POWs that were unaccounted for. And the ones that were returned were able to walk. They were, looked like they were reasonable condition. But here in Fraser, where I live, there was a family that had a missing son, Robert Leon Tucci, who was a captain at the time. And he was flying an F-4 Phantom II in the secret war in Laos. We weren't there, but we were there. And that's what my outfit did. When Nixon stopped the bombing, our sorties picked up. We were doing twice as many sorties. We're saying, well, if the bombing has stopped in Vietnam, why are we doing all these bombing runs? So here where I live, they have a VFW post 6691. And when the POWs came home, there was no Robert L. Tucci. And so the family of Robert, they came to the VFW and said, how come Robert's remains or body hasn't been returned? So the commander at the time here was Nelson Amstill, and he partnered with a judge, Frank Zadkoff, and they raised money here in Fraser to send these two fellas to Paris to negotiate with the North Vietnamese to find out where Robert Tucci is. So they went there, they had their meeting with the North Vietnamese, and the North Vietnamese answer to them was, when Richard Nixon pays for the damage that he caused by bombing North Vietnam, we will let you know about Tucci and many others that are unaccounted for. So we found out, that Tucci was shot down in Laos, but we weren't in Laos. So the local newspaper here, the Macomb Daily, Mitch Kahishan started a series about where's Robert Tucci, where are the POWs. And so at the same time, the POW-MIA program started up. Marty got involved, Vietnam vets got involved. And so that kind of kept me going with it. And like I said, we kind of hold that flag dear because we were part of the initiation of starting the POW movement.
Yeah, and the reason we're having this conversation, and Mike and I have talked about this, is it's still relevant today. It may be 50 years later, but even today, if you go to a veteran program, there's often a table recognizing the MIA POWs, and it's very symbolic. I had the opportunity to take my nephew to one recently. He had no idea what the table was about, and heard the meaningfulness of the lemon, the salt, the upside down glass, the empty plate. There's a very important symbolism here, but we have to explain that to people who weren't around 50 years ago,
Right.
and keep it alive to know that the country made a commitment to bring these guys home. And yeah, it may be many, many years later, but the families still really do need and appreciate getting remains home. And so one of the projects you're working on, let's talk about is trying to keep that idea alive in a state capital like Lansing, Michigan, where you're working on a chair. Talk a little bit about what that project's about.
Well, I had the opportunity to participate in one of the runs for Rolling Thunder. Rolling Thunder is sponsored by the motorcycle group Rolling Thunder. And for Memorial Day, each year they would have a bike run to the state, to the national capital, I'm sorry. And I had the privilege of participating because I was on the Michigan Vietnam Monument Commission. So I actually got to ride in the lead of that group. But the interesting sidebar is that I had a Yamaha, and these were mostly Harleys. And a lot of the Vietnam vets, they had the Harley Davidsons. And so,
you got ribbed for your Yamaha.
I got ribbed, but I'm in the front, right? I'm with the Vietnam veteran motorcycle people, and when real quick, we left Michigan here with 6 bikes. We got to Monroe with hundreds of bikes. We got to Ohio. We had 2,000 bikes. So we're going into Maryland, and there's a Harley dealer that is kind of welcoming everybody. So I'm in the front of the group, and the guy's out in front. He's waving in the Harleys, but he's telling me, no, you can't go in there. So the bikers that are with me, they're going, no, he doesn't go in there. We don't go in. So we got thousands of motorcycles backed up trying to get into this Harley Davidson thing. So the owner comes out, and he shakes his head. He says, go ahead, you can go in there. But anyway,
let me get you back to the chair that you're working on.
Sure. So yes. So the Rolling Thunder Motorcycle Club, their mission is to have a POW MIA chair at every state. Marty Eddy's been working with this as long as I've known her. And we have been instrumental in, like I say, beating the drum, letting people know how important this is. And I think if you go to any veterans, whatever you want to club, I say, you'll see a chair in there. So Michigan does not have a POW MIA chair. And Chapter 9, we've been able to raise quite a bit of money, and we said, we're going to buy the chair. So we actually went to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We found a custom manufacturer, if you will, that they deal with Amish craftsmen. And we modeled the chair after the chair in Washington, D.C. So it's they call it a library chair. It's white oak, got a brown color to it, and a black leather cushion. And we also have a 24-inch by 24-inch bronze plaque that's being made that tells the story, like you said. It has the symbol of the POW MIA logo and also the seal of the state of Michigan. And I hope this gets to the right ears, because why on earth can we not have this chair of honor, a national icon, in our state capital, when Michigan in particular is so significant in the history of the military activities in America? So I've gone through politicians, I've gone through bureaucrats, I've gone through, people, supporters, and it's just amazing to me. And I'm going to say it right to you. Shame on these people. Shame, 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 because lest we forget, and it's not going to cost the state of Michigan anything but a space to put it.
Well, and I want to jump on this, because the POW MIA iconic symbol says at the bottom, you are not forgotten.
Exactly.
And we talked earlier, like, we have to pass on to the younger generations what this is about, why it's a sacred trust. And the state capitol is a place that they bring school kids in by the busloads every year. So this would create an opportunity for younger people to see that chair and ask, hey, what's that about?
What's that about? Exactly. Sure. And the Library and Historical Museum is right there adjacent to the memorial. And the grounds where the memorial, the Vietnam Memorial, is also sacred. And it might be a place for future wars to be recognized. There'll always be wars, I hate to say. But we're kind of across from the Library Historical Museum and the Supreme Court building and the Capitol in this mall area. So we fought very hard. It took 11 years to get the Vietnam Memorial there, but we're happy to have that. We call it tension and strength. We call that memorial tension and strength because it's a beam that's bent on a curve with a wire, and that shows the tension, and then the steel and the concrete show the strength. And there's 264 names on there.
So, Mike, as we come to a conclusion here, and I appreciate you coming on to represent
Sure.
the POW-MIA community. And as we approach the National Remembrance Day, September 19th, 2025 this year,
Yes.
what final words do you want to pass on to our veteran radio listeners about the importance of remembering POWs and MIAs?
Well, we have a motto: for those who fought for it, freedom has a flavor the protected will never know. And, lest we forget, you mentioned earlier, and I'm going to say real quick, I mean, we have prisoners of war right now in Gaza. We have the Vietnamese prisoners of war number in up to 500,000. Not that they're all service people, but it's just amazing to me. Lest we forget, and how can we expect our young people to step up and serve this country if we don't recognize those who are unaccounted for? It's very, very important. I appreciate you taking the time to have me come on here and, help with the cause.
Well, we've got a moral obligation, and I think that's what you're trying to communicate, is that the country has this moral obligation, and future generations will judge us by whether or not we paid attention to it.
For sure.
Mike, thanks for taking some time with Veterans Radio today. We really do appreciate it.
I appreciate what you're doing, and God bless America, and keep her flying.
Well, as I said at the outset, these were both kind of unusual stories to tell, but needed to be told. And we hope that you found them somewhat inspiring, and maybe you want to go learn a little more, or maybe you want to keep the MIA POW alive at your post or at your church or at your school, whatever it might be. So we can't do this program, I think we tell you this every week, without the help of our sponsors. We'd certainly love you to be either an individual donator to the cause. You can go to veteransradio.org, hit the donate button and do that, or reach out to Dale at veteransradio.org if you'd like to be a corporate sponsor. We want to thank nvbdc.org, the gold standard for certification of disabled and veteran-owned businesses, the Vietnam Veterans of America National Chapter, Legal Help for Veterans, and all they do with regards to helping veterans get the disability rights that they've earned, the VA Ann Arbor Healthcare System, and our local posts as well. Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter 310 in Ann Arbor, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423, American Legion Irwin Prescorn Post 46 in Ann Arbor. All of these folks really keep us going and keep us on the air. It is a labor of love for those of us who do it. We're not getting rich doing this at all, but we are getting spiritually benefit, if you will, from bringing these stories to you and making sure that this history just doesn't die on the ash heaps. We're right around Veterans Day. You hopefully are going out to various programs in your local area, wherever you're listening to Veterans Radio, to participate. We've got a couple of days here before Veterans Day, but get out and participate. Wear the cap. Show folks. There's so few of us left who are veterans. Show the cap. Show the flag. Get out and do those sorts of things. Go to the memorials. Go to the parades, so that this is alive and doesn't just become dusty old history. And it's really also important so that the kids out there kind of know who the military veterans are and what they did. We're going to have a great opportunity over the next year to talk about this as the Congressional Medal of Honor Society comes to Detroit at the end of September of 2026. it'll be a great opportunity to help explain to kids today, whether they're in grade school, high school, early college, that the heroes of yesteryear are regular people who did extraordinary things. So we'd encourage you to kind of watch for some of that as it develops. It's going to be a great opportunity here in Southeast Michigan. You can go to their website, which is medalofhonordetroit.com, to learn more about that upcoming convention. There are only 61 living Medal of Honor recipients, so it's a pretty small select group who are in there, and there's a lot we can learn from them, so we'd certainly encourage you to do that. Just as we'd encourage you to listen to Veterans Radio on your podcasts. We post something new every Tuesday morning. We also post our Sunday program that you're listening to, so you can catch it there if you missed it live on Sunday. But there's a lot of good information, a lot of things to pass along. So I'm Jim Fausone with Veterans Radio. My partner Dale Throneberry will be back next week. And until then, you are dismissed.